Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very powerful show coming right up. Our first guest today is will-sharon, and he's here to talk to us about Dreamwork for coaches. Early in his career, Will started working with emotionally disturbed children at what was then called the Manhattan State Hospital. Over the course of his work and 13 years later, Will acquired an MSW and after some roles in administration, worked as a therapist at the Veterans Administration. This formative experience resulted in a continuous curiosity about human condition, what motivates us, and what gets in our way. So let's welcome to the show, Will.
Well, thank you, Marianne. I'm really glad to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And my goodness, when we think about Dreamwork, a lot of times people don't think of that as something that's great for coaching.
That's very true. I think in Western culture, in recent Western culture, dreams have been kind of hijacked by the therapeutic community. I don't think that was intentional, but, with Freud and Jung, it really became the province of an expert to tell you what you're dreaming of. And if you look back in the history of human beings, that's just not the way it worked. Many times dreams were brought to the community, particularly in Native American cultures. Islam had a psychology of dreams in the 7th century. So I guess my mission, even though I didn't start out with this, is to sort of democratize working with dreams. And my sense in being a coach, I was a therapist for a while before I became a coach. My sense is that it is a perfect fit for the coaching community, that it really relies on basic skills of asking powerful questions and active listening and holding people as, creative, resourceful, and whole.
So how did you get started in the line of dream working?
Well, the first career that I had before I went into my corporate career, I started out working with kids in psychiatric hospitals and then got my master's in social work and became a therapist at the Veterans Administration. And I was in supervision in an institute at the time and did a lot of work with dreams. And so became a student, not a scholar certainly of Jung, but I read, Jung and Sullivan and so forth, and really sort of fell into the model of the idea of interpreting dreams. And then, fast forward 30 years in various corporate roles. And I was looking at getting back into, I thought, being a therapist. I looked at how long it would take to recertify my master's, and I thought, there's no way I'm doing that. And somebody said, well, why don't you get a coaching certificate? So I'm being completely honest with you. My initial motivation around getting a coaching certificate was literally to get some letters after my name so I could, see in my mind patients. And what I discovered was that coaching really turns the whole process 180 degrees. I'm not the expert. The client's the expert. My job really is to facilitate them getting in touch with their own power. And so when you look at dreams, all of a sudden, instead of starting with the pathology, which is what you do in therapy, and by the way, I think therapy is very appropriate and useful for a lot of people and helpful. But what we start with really is, okay, a dream is another pathway for you to get in touch with what we call your soul's purpose. What is your destiny versus what the story is that you've been given about how you're supposed to be. And in that context, dreams can be very powerful. And so I don't interpret dreams. I help a client animate their dreams. So I can give you an example of that. I had a student come to class, and it's one of those things where sort of perfect synergy between some stuff I was reading by a guy named Hellman, and she came in and she told this dream. Basically, she was trying to get somewhere. She was driving in a car. She wasn't quite late, but she was a little pressured, and then she's walking in a park, and now she's really concerned about being late. Coming around this turn, thinking, well, what if I see a snake? Comes around the turn, there's a gigantic black snake in her path, who coils itself up and sticks its face right in hers, and she's so frightened she wakes up. Okay. So it turns out that this student had been having dreams about snakes for some period of time, years. And she came into the class and said, well, I think the snake's about my father. I said, well, you know what? Let's not interpret the snake. Let's get to know the snake. Let's go back into the dream. Let's use active imagination to go back in the dream and have you have a conversation with the snake. Because one of the things that happens in the therapeutic process is that when we interpret the snake, we don't need the snake anymore. Actually, we don't need the dream anymore because now we have this interpretation and we can go off and work on our problem. Mm-hmm. But there's a way of thinking about this that says, well, wait a minute, the reason the snake keeps coming back is because it's saying, hey, I'm part of you. It means you get to know me. And so as a coach, really what I'm doing is facilitating an internal conversation with the client. And it's not about ancient history, because that's not what we do as coaches. It's now. It's right now. Let's get to know this snake. Let's understand what this snake is doing in you, what part of it is in you. And so, my own experience is, I have to tell you, first of all, I was just tremendously relieved because I didn't have to come up with some interpretation. It was because it's not my dream, It's my client's dream. And so I got really excited about this, coaching context for working with people, and particularly around dreams. So what I did was I put a class together. I taught the class earlier this year, and then I went through the process of submitting it to the ICF so I can give people, CCEs, 12 CCEs for taking the class. And it's fascinating because, you can have an idea that this would make a lot of sense, right? And I've had these ideas before, and they don't make any sense to anybody else. But this, this does. There's a real resonance with coaches. And when I talk to coaches a lot, they go, I didn't know what to do with the dream when a client brought it in. And it's not a mystery. I think that's the other thing that I really want to try and get across to people. I mean, life is a mystery, okay? Mm-hmm. The fact that we're here is a mystery, but a dream is no less or more mysterious than that. It's really part of who you are. And, there's a guy, John O'Donoghue. He's an Irish poet and a philosopher. And he said something that really, I read when I was just first starting this. He said, look, the soul is not in the body. The body is in the soul. And so you sort of think about that for a second. So, well, wait a minute. The body is in the soul. What does that really mean? Mm-hmm. Well, what it means is that there is something far larger than you can comprehend that is part of you. And so with my neuroscience friends, I have a lot of conversations because I think neuroscience is fascinating and a very positive fact of our lives, that we're understanding how the brain works. And they point me to all these, experiments where the brain lights up in this way in the MRI and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, okay, our argument is not whether or not that's true. Our argument is whether that's a cause or an effect. So they see brain activity as the cause of a dream, and I see brain activity as the effect of dreaming. Because the context in which I think, and I think a lot of people think about life, is that there's a mystery that's much greater than who we are, that we are part of. So I just, I've been really gratified at the response of a lot of coaches. I'm doing the course 3 times this year, and talking to people like you about it. And it's a lot of fun to work with clients around dreams. And it's one of the things you discover is that you and your client can work on a dream, and they'll come back with another one a couple of weeks later, and you realize, oh man, we were really off on that, because the dreamer keeps coming back until you get it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can have additions to the dream where something else shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I always tell clients is, look, you have the ability to go back into a dream. You have the ability to ask for more information the next night about a dream. Maybe it's not going to always happen, but sometimes it does, because it's you. It's not some mysterious other thing. It's you. And the more you do it, the more you practice working with dreams, the more you really can sort of continue the story of a dream.
Well, it's interesting how much insight dreams can give us in regards to things that are going on and things that, like I'm sure you see this all the time, what your clients are encountering during their day.
Yeah, I mean, there's an idea that dreams sort of fall into two categories. One is prescriptive. So the idea is there's a part of you called the dreamer, and the dreamer is in the soul as well as the listener. My job really is to connect soul to soul. But so there are dreams that are prescriptive from the standpoint that they're trying to show you how you are behaving in a way that may not be in your best interest. That may not be, and the typical thing is, either you lose your temper, at work, or there are things that you're doing that are not in your best interest. And so the dreamer will rearrange your biography and make you 30 years old when you're 3 and throwing a tantrum, or things like that. So it's basically showing you. It's like a mirror. And then there are some dreams that are prescriptive. And they're not, open the blue door on the left or anything like that usually, but they're sort of pointing you in a particular direction, something that you might explore. And usually what happens is, when I'm working with a client and we both kind of sort of hook on to an idea like that, then it's a lot of what we call active imagination. It's a lot of trying to explore a feeling that comes in a dream to see where it goes, to see what comes up about, the current or the future. And I think, I should say, Marianne, that one of the things that I think puts coaches off dreams is that a lot of people think they're about the past, that they're going to bring up some history of some unresolved problem in childhood, etc. And what I try to say to people is, look, all you have in this world is right now. That's it, I mean, it's glorious, it's amazing, but all you have is right now. Your memories of the past, I guarantee you, have changed. I know mine have, over time. And the reason they change over time is because they are present. They're the experience you have of the present. So this is not about taking you back to a childhood trauma. There are techniques to do that. They tend to fall into the therapy realm. But the work that I do with dreams around this kind of stuff is to really, I go back to the idea that the dreamer rearranges your biography to bring something into the present, not to take you back to the past. And those are the insights, that really have a profound effect. One of the things I've been doing, I do podcasts periodically, and probably for obvious reasons, I've done a couple on the state of men in our culture. Mm-hmm. And I think men are in some trouble, and I don't mean trouble, losing their jobs for sexual harassment. I mean trouble in the sense that their whole cultural definition is changing. I mean, for very good reasons, but it's a difficult time for a lot of men. And working with dreams is really a way it's a lot easier from my perspective. It's a way to really try and help men connect with how they feel about certain things. Because the dreamer in everybody is aware of the ego, but not particularly concerned with it, And so you really do get an understanding of just the nature of how you feel about certain things. And I think that's fundamentally, for men, a real issue, that they limit how they feel, or they won't recognize how they feel, because we've been conditioned that that's not a great thing to be doing if you want to be successful. And so I've found Dreamwork to be very effective in sort of short-circuiting the cultural bias against what you're supposed to be.
Well, it's interesting the different aspects of Dreamwork that can really help a coach with the people that they're working with. What are some of the tools that they use to kind of just gain a greater understanding of what kind of like the dreams that their clients are having?
Well, I tend to try and stay away from here are the 4 things you can do with a dream. Because, well, let me put it this way. So my belief is that when a client comes to me, there's a choice being made, right? And you can say, well, how that, somebody told them about it, so how they made it really making the choice. Well, they made a choice. They made a choice to make that connection. And so I am a chosen listener to their dreamer. And that is a dynamic, just like in all the other things that we do in coaching, that is sort of central to what we do. If they chose a different coach, they'd have a different experience. So what I'm saying to coaches is, look, just apply the same context that you use as a coach to working with dreams, which is that this person has chosen you. This person has chosen you to listen to their dreams. And your responsibility is to notice patterns, right? So, if somebody keeps coming in with a dream about some sort of frustration, you can say, well, okay, let's look at this and let's try and understand what's trying to be said to you here in terms of the context of your current life. So that is a responsibility you have. You don't just show up, tabula rasa to every session and never dream. But the other responsibility, and it frankly is harder, and it's harder in every area of coaching, when we hear someone and we think, for God's sake, if you just do blah, blah, you'd be fine. We all have that, little voice in us. But with dreams, it's very important, and I would say this to coaches, is I'm not ready to work unless after somebody has told me a dream, I have no idea what it means. When I have no idea what it means, then I'm ready. If I think I know what it means, I got to stop and get rid of that thought because it's not my dream. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that is important is this whole idea of people saying, well, I can't remember my dreams, or I always have nightmares. And basically, what that is the same kind of story that we interrupt people with in all the other areas of coaching. People come in and they want to tell you a story about what happened. And you always say, well, okay, let me stop you. How many times have you told this story? Well, probably 20 times. Well, you don't need to tell me the story again, right? That's not a good use of our time. So if the story is I can't remember my dreams, then the question is, well, how can I go you to that story? Because I can help you remember your dreams. There's very clear, simple things you do. You go to bed with an intention. You put a pencil and paper next to your bed. You ask to remember your dreams. And I've never had a case yet where over a couple of weeks people didn't start remembering their dreams. I'm circling around the answer to your question, but I think it's important to mention this guy.
That's okay.
My answer to your question is I actually don't. As I sort of said, I don't like to give people sort of hard and fast rules. More often I give sort of context or containers. But there's a guy named Matthew Walker who just wrote a book called Why We Sleep. And in his book, he basically said, look, if you're not sleeping 8 hours a day, you're shortening your life, period, full stop. Okay, well, that's pretty amazing. He's now doing a study about dementia patients, and specifically Alzheimer's, and not sleeping. There's a protein that builds up in your brain when you don't sleep, because there literally is a sort of a shrinking of the brain and a washing of fluid through the brain that occurs when you sleep, and if you don't sleep enough, that doesn't happen, and so it's like the stuff builds up. But that's another part of the course I teach, which is that sleep is vital to health, not just physical health, but, mental health and emotional health. There was a time in my life I was a personal trainer. And, I used to say to people, look, you can't come to the gym every day and lift weights. You're going to hurt yourself. That's a direct, from when you start to when you hurt yourself. It's very clear. Your body needs rest. And you need to sleep for a lot of neurological reasons, but you also need to sleep to dream, because you're not going to dream if you don't sleep. I'm not through with his book yet, and he has a whole section on dreams, which I think is off, but that's okay. We can disagree about that. But so a lot of times I start out with sleep. I start out with, how do you remember your dreams? And then there are, people who are frightened about working with dreams because there can be a lot of emotion in dreams. It's one of the reasons I don't record my classes. I give people the slides that I use, but I don't record the classes because you never know what's going to come up in a dream. And when you're in a workshop, you can choose whether you're going to participate or not, or where you're going to go. It's a little tougher when you're working with dreams.
Yeah.
And so the issue around emotion and dreams is it's your soul, jumping up and down saying, pay attention, and their feelings. And again, I find this more with men than I do with women. It's like we don't need to be afraid of them. We just need to pay attention to them, because those emotions, that fear, is part of you that is saying, hey, there's something happening here you really need to pay attention to. And many times, nightmares and repetitive dreams are just another way of the soul holding up a mirror saying, look at this. I'm going to keep telling you this until you look at this. For me, whenever I start something new, I will have dreams about not taking the last course in college and only discovering it on the last day. It's like, it's impossible. How did I screw this up? I can almost write down when I'm going to have those dreams. And they always come up whenever I have decided to sort of push the envelope a bit. Because it's an inherent fear in me that I don't really know what the hell I'm doing, right? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, that's healthy because it gives me humility. On the other hand, it's not true, because I work hard at what I do, and I usually am well prepared. But dreams will do that. There's another aspect of dreams. There's this idea of what we call the trickster. Comes out of, I live in the Southwest, so the trickster out here is the coyote or the cocopelli. Mm-hmm. And what the trickster does in dreams is frustrate the ego. So you'll have somebody, on a bank line, and they can't get any money out of the bank, and the ATM doesn't work, and they lost their wallet in the course of the dream, right? And so that's about, again, a frustration of the ego in the service of forcing you into a different awareness. Now, we don't know, given the example I gave you, what the awareness would be, but when you see that kind of frustration in a dream, again, what you want to do is help the client look at what's going on in their life. And usually there's something they're trying to push. They're trying to make happen. They're insisting on their story working out the way they want it to work out. And, it's something to look at and talk about and try and understand that that's not really the way life works. There's a difference between intention and insistence. So that's why, again, when you start there, you're not sort of taking that issue on head first, right? You're allowing the person's subconscious or dream world to send that message to them, rather than you trying to help them to get to it in their conscious life. There's another way to think about it, which is the metaphor of day school and night school. So during the day, we have experiences, we have relationships, we have a whole range of emotions that feel good and great and terrible and so forth. And then we go to night school, where we are informed in a very different way about our experience. And the idea over time, one of the reasons to work with dreams, is you want to begin to develop synergy between day school and night school. So there's something called lucid dreaming. And in lucid dreaming, when you're in a dream, maybe you're given a choice. You choose to go through this door as opposed to down that hallway. Well, when you're making a choice in a dream, it's your conscious mind is injecting itself into the dream world. And that usually begins to happen as you have worked with dreams for a bit yourself, and you're getting the synergy between day school and night school.
Getting that information. With all the people that you work with, what would you say some of the common themes that you see?
Grief, and I don't mean grief over, a death or anything like that. I mean a sense of grief about why it has taken them so long to either get themselves into coaching to get some help, or grief over a particular pattern of behavior that they discover that they've been repeating and repeating and repeating and getting the same result. And so there's a lot of that kind of work, and it takes just a little while to understand that there's no way you could have gotten here faster. We walk down the blind alleys, not because they're blind alleys, but because there's experience that we need to have. And unfortunately, it takes longer than most of us want it to take. But I would say to you that a lot of, and I think it's a lot of men, mostly, most of my male clients are men who are in their late 40s, early 50s, who have achieved some level of success, and don't understand why that's not really satisfying. And I have a theory about misogyny, which is that misogyny is really born out of envy. And there's been this trade-off where men have said, okay, we're going to narrow our emotional range, but then we get to be in charge. Because supposedly, if we do that, then we'll actually get some stuff done, even though it's very clear that women are totally capable of getting a lot of things done, probably in some cases better. But there's this cultural sort of decision that says, we got to be, in charge and make sure we don't get too excited about anything and all that kind of stuff. And the problem with that, as we have seen recently, is that when you narrow that emotional range, it metastasizes. It comes out in pretty ugly, nasty ways. And even if it doesn't, even if it's not Harvey Weinstein, it is a limitation in terms of what's possible for a man, what's possible for a man in a relationship, and what's possible for a man in life. And that's where the grief comes up, because as you get into understanding, and a lot of it comes through dreams, understanding how you limited yourself, there's a lot of sadness about that. If you're in your 50s, you're past the halfway mark. So I think that's the primary thing that I deal with. And what's always fascinating is that if you walk through the grief, there's tremendous joy. Oh, every time,
Yeah, and I think that provides a lot of encouragement for men who are looking to, make changes and, be able to express their feelings and not really worry about that, and not appear like, hey, I'm weak because I'm showing feelings when, nothing's further from the truth.
Yeah, and I think what men do is they confuse anger and fierceness. Right? So, Robert Bly wrote that book, Iron John, I guess he wrote it in the 90s, and he basically said, well, we got past the 50s guy. Not everybody did, but, a bunch of men got past the 50s guy who was kind of numb and, liked women and liked their bodies, but really didn't understand who they were and didn't understand who they were as people themselves. And then we got the 90s man who is nice. He's a nicer guy. He's gotten in touch with some of his feelings. He's willing to listen, all that kind of stuff. But the problem is, in the process, became frightened of his fierceness. Saw fierceness as anger. Well, you need fierceness in a relationship. You need fierceness in life. Embracing fierceness in a man it's a fantastic, wonderful thing. I mean, my history is Celtic, and so I have a archetype of that kind of a man. But I think what a lot of men feel, the 90s guy who wants to be a nice guy, is that they think that fierceness is anger, and they're afraid of it. And it's not anger. Anger is very different. Anger comes from, I think, envy. And that's dangerous, and that's not good. And so when you're not in touch with what you're envious of in a woman, her emotional range, her ability to have social connections, if you're not aware of that, then you sublimate that anger, and that comes out in kind of nasty ways. So I think we're at a point where we've made some progress, as men. Mm-hmm. But we need to re-embrace what we've exiled in ourselves because we thought it was a bad thing. Not a bad thing. If you can have the emotional range and the fierceness of being a man, it's a great combination, and it's a very attractive combination. I'm very. I mean, this is a very strange time in the world right now, but I'm very excited and hopeful about the opportunity that this has given men. We're going to go through some real nonsense, and I don't mean around the people who have been caught out and the punishment that they're going to get or have gotten. I think that's totally appropriate. Mm-hmm. But the problem we have is we're a very sort of Calvinistic country, and we tend to sometimes stop at the punishment level. And there is an opportunity for us to move past that and say, well, okay, let's look at all the men who, think misogynistic thoughts, who don't act on them, and those are the guys we need to deal with because there's hope there. There's the ability to move past the envy and to really, as I say, reintegrate the fierceness of being a man.
Well, gosh, we could talk for hours, obviously. The time goes by so quickly.
Yeah, I know. I just looked at the clock. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about Dreamworking for coaching?
Well, best way, I guess, is my website, which is my name, will-sharon. It's WILLSHARON.com. Mm-hmm. And I actually have a course starting January 17th. It runs for 6 weeks. There's 90-minute sessions, and then people work in pairs and triads on their own dreams. So, through my website, there's my contact information there. There are all the podcasts and all the stuff people put on websites. It's all there. That's the best way to reach me.
Oh, how perfect. Well, thank you so much, Will, for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. We are going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Do you know that you can become a genius at any age? Do you know that you can change your life and create a brilliant life for yourself? Hi, I am Olympia LaPointe, an award-winning rocket scientist who you more than likely have seen on TED Talks, Impact Theory, and PBS. Check out my latest book, Answers Unleashed, The Science of Unleashing Your Brain's Power. Simply go to answersunleashed.com books and check it out for yourself. You'll find the tools to help you create the life you've always wanted.
The highly acclaimed and newly released book, The Hand Part 2 by Lynn Van Praagh Grattan, describes the journey between a psychic medium and a family who lost a son. Messages from Beyond Eternity's Gate is of love and healing. For more information, visit www.lynnvanpraagh-grattan.com. That's www.lynnvanpraagh-grattan.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted to be introducing our next guest, David Pond, and he's here today to talk to us about his new book, Astrology and Relationships. Now, David is an astrologer, author, speaker, and international workshop leader. David has published a number of books on metaphysical topics, including Chakras Beyond Beginners, Astrology and Relationships, Chakras for Beginners, and The Pursuit of Happiness and Western Seekers. David has a Master's of Science degree in experimental metaphysics and has been practicing astrology for over 35 years. So let's welcome to the show, David.
Well, thank you, Marianne. Nice to be here today. Glad to share with you.
Oh, hey, I'm so excited that we're here to talk about your new book. How exciting is that? I mean, books take such a while to get out. So, they're always such a journey.
Getting it all, everybody who knows has written a book. You have a vision, and then it just takes a lot of time to create it. And, it takes a lot of time.
A lot of patience, a lot of time. Well, before we start diving into your book, Astrology and Relationships, why don't you share with us, just so we can know a little bit more about you, like how did you even get started on this path?
Well, when I was a young man back in the late 60s, I was on my way to becoming a school teacher. That was the path I thought I was going to become. And I did a couple of years in the classroom, actually. But when I was a young man, my older sister, was already a professional astrologer, and she did her first reading for me, my first reading for me. And she's a skilled astrologer, so helpful. And it wasn't as if I was amazed at how did she know things about my interest in sports or whatnot. She grew up with me. That was evident. But I got so intrigued with the map of the inner world of consciousness, all these places within myself that I thought were kind of just strange, and yet I found a healthy perspective from it. It really gave me a good orientation. And from that, I've got interested in other people's charts and in my students' charts. I started seeing, as a grade school teacher, that I could learn something about kids if I wasn't having difficulty connecting with them on a particular teaching assignment I was working on. Sometimes I could look at their astrology, their Mercury, and say, oh, they learn in a different way than I'm trying to present the material. So I started seeing how helpful it could be. Now, I've been a professional counselor, astrologer for over 35 years and been married for 42 years, so I've worked with relationships quite a bit, and I love to work with relationships because astrology is such a helpful tool, but that's what brought me into it, is just that it can just bring helpful guidance to people to get more in touch with their true essence, what they came here to do, what their natural way of being. Our culture gives us lots of clues and, go through school and education. But astrology is unique and it's specific to each individual, right? So that's why I like it.
Especially, I mean, the stars are the stars, and I think it's just so fascinating how each birth chart is like a fingerprint, so to speak.
Well, it is. It's really a fingerprint of what we've been given to work with, not what a person's done with it. We all have free will. I can never look at a chart and assume I know everything about a person, of course, because we're not puppets. We can make choices, and that's the one thing that with astrology can't really predict is what a person has done with what they've been given to work with, and that's what we can do as astrologists, is help people see how to use their astrology to improve their lives in different ways. And I think it's so helpful in relationships of all types, whether it be romantic or partnership or a parent-child or working with a business friend. It's a wonderful tool to help us better understand each other.
Yeah. Well, and so your new book, Astrology and Relationships, who is the intended reader for this? Is it just people who have really dived into astrology and really know a lot, or is it for anybody?
This is for anybody and everybody, Marianne. And I write best for beginners, and I think advanced astrologists would enjoy some of the uniqueness of this chart and its orientation, but it's really meant for people who are interested in astrology and want to use it in their life, and particularly within relationships. And so I write it really for beginners. And
people to pick up and go through. Well, and so, I know that you talk about using this for relationships. Can it be used for any relationships, like work, people you're working with, and maybe, because I know sometimes people have discord with some, it could be a coworker that's really hard to understand or to communicate with.
Well, absolutely, it's helpful for all types of relationships, and this is actually a revised edition that's coming out. This book was first written in 1991, and I just rewrote it this last year, and I love the subtitle that the publishers chose. I wish I would have, but they did, but Simple Ways to Improve Your Relationship with Anyone. Isn't that a delicious subtitle?
Oh, my goodness, especially now. We could use more of that now, right?
Exactly, right? We think of how divisive the world is and how difficulty we all have aligning with this and that. This teaches the tools of how to get along better with everyone, anyone. And the beautiful thing with astrology about relationships is it gives us an opportunity to step outside of our own lens of looking at life, our own expectations, and to see life directly through our partner or our child's eyes, the person that we're dealing with. And just that understanding, because isn't it true that in relationships, like a romantic or a friendship, it's great until we get to that place that I just don't understand that. Why do they act that way? I can understand somebody can think that way. And then astrology gives us that opportunity to say, oh, that's why that's important to that person. Oh, I see why they act that way. That doesn't change the energy, but it gives us understanding so we can accept the appropriateness of differences, right?
Well, and so, when you're working with people, what's the number one thing they come to you for?
Well, in terms of,
for their, if they're coming to you for astrology and because a lot of times people will say, gosh, I've got this going on. Maybe it's upset in my life, or it's in relationships, or,
I could be, somebody walks in the door that's always going to be, or typically going to be, career, health, relationships, or money, finances, well-being. And often, many people come for their spiritual direction, that sense of wanting to connect to a larger reality. But those are the questions that we ask about are my work, my life purpose, my health, and my relationships. And that's why relationships is such a useful tool with astrology, because your chart's different than mine. And instead of, some of the older astrology books, I think mine is unique, is that instead of saying what signs you can get along with, okay, if you're a Scorpio, then you can really best get along with other Pisces or Cancer, but not so well with Virgo or Sagittarius. But this is this is limiting use of astrology. And instead of thinking of it this way, we try to do with this book, what I do with this book, is show how those two signs get along, not that they're, if there's tension, there's ways to use the tension. If there's flow, there's ways to use the flow. So really it's how to help people connect with where their great strengths are. Each planet has a different level of the relationship. When you're in a relationship and just at the sun level, if you're with somebody who really appreciates you, recognizes who you are, your self-esteem grows. But sometimes if you're with somebody that doesn't really appreciate or acknowledge who you are, it's helpful to see what the other person really, that's what their essence is. And then the moon is our emotional patterns. Like you and I are both going to hopefully bring out our sun, bring out our best, try to bring out our light this interview. But then when we're done, maybe we'll be on break and we'll drop into our patterns that kind of get comfortable with. And our emotional patterns, it's good to know another person's emotional patterns and needs and how they receive nurturing. And so many issues about Mercury with communication, how we each talk and communicate. And some people make decisions real fast, other people make decisions real slow. And it's good, healthy to know in a counseling session that, I'm getting patient with her, but that's the way she processes information. She comes to good, thorough decisions that way rather than another person who likes to have snap decisions.
Yeah.
You go through each of the planets, so I don't know if you want to continue that track, like with Venus. Everybody wants to know about Venus, the goddess of love, and patron of the arts, the love of beauty. It's very important in relationships, and it shows how each person receives love, what they value, what they're drawn to. And isn't that helpful information to know with a partner or a relationship, what they really appreciate, what they value, what's meaningful for them, right?
And also kind of what would be like some of the best signs for us to get along with. I mean, Valentine's Day is just right around the corner. So I'm sure people are picking up.
That's right. That's the Venus Day. That's the Sweetheart Day. Mm-hmm. And it's also good to know how to... the book also doesn't just show the other people, but also how it gives activities and exercises of activating those planets within yourself. So you're skilled at your communication, so you're skilled at your emotional needs. So you're not looking for everything through relationship, right?
Yeah.
We know what happens there, that rarely works. And it's wonderful to fall in love, but we have to be able to find our own inner fulfillment, our own base, our own satisfaction, our own meaningful involvement, and then share that in relationship, right?
Yeah.
So we go through all the planets at that level too, of a person's chart of how to be more skillful with their own way of for many people, it's receiving love. Sometimes it's cultural training, like how many people are raised with the attitude that it's better to give than receive. Mm-hmm. And it really sounds beautiful morally, but it's an energy depletion model, isn't it? If you give more than you receive, if you give more money than you receive, you're going broke.
Yeah, it's just not a good way to balance the books at the end of the day. You do want to have it really is like an even flow as much as possible,
Isn't that what we want? But yet many people have an awkward time receiving compliments, return favors, opportunities for assistance. I'm not talking about asking for, just acts of kindness that come towards them, and learning how to receive. Joyfully I give and joyfully I receive is really teaching for all of us, just to work better with receiving the kindness, the love that does come our way, right?
Yeah.
Now with Mars, excuse me, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's just you're open for that, and being able to receive a relationship, because you're so right. So many people are close to it, and a lot of times they don't even understand why, or maybe they're pursuing partners who are just not open to that. And so your book, I think, would help a lot with people being able to get to that place of openness.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. We get to see the patterns that we have of closing up, of not receiving, and then feeling like, what's wrong? I have to give, and I don't get back, but people are trying to get back, and we're not receiving. Whoa, it's helping us learn how to open up, and also then with the other. And then you get to Mars, you keep going out. Mars is we could call it our warrior, our male, assertive, man or woman, gay or straight. We've all got a Venus, we've all got a Mars. So Mars is like how we assert ourselves, how we act on our passion, but it's also how we deal with our anger. And it's very helpful to know how another person tends to deal with their anger and how the two of the signs deal with each other so that they can be mindful. I think we can adapt to most anything once we know what it is, right?
Yeah.
And astrology helps us to identify, like, oh, these are the triggers. If I do this, it pushes that hot button. Okay. So it's a way of educating each other. And then you get out to the social planets and the Jupiter and Saturn. That's a little bit more fun to work with. Jupiter, what kind of rewards, what kind of vacations that both people want to reach for? And with Saturn, well, that's where we get tested and how we handle each other's challenges and difficulties. And, in relationships, when we make somebody else a project, so we're always trying to fix them. Boy, it sure sours the romance, doesn't it?
Oh, my goodness. Well, and so how does Neptune play a part in all this?
Now we're getting to the spiritual planets, Marianne. And people on your show, I'm sure, are more interested not just in personality, but their spiritual planets. And Neptune deals with, well, we could call it your third eye. It's psychic vision, spiritual vision. Artists and spiritual seekers are both using that in very healthy ways. But Neptune, for many people who aren't trained, can be where we have illusions, escapism, fall in love with qualities that aren't there. We have to be mindful of the right use with Neptune. But that spiritual level of connection, of seeing and honoring the spirituality in each other. I think the clearest path with Neptune is meditation. There are many ways to get there, but if we said that when we get that place in meditation, all of us would know practice. We're finally at that place where we can be a little bit more peaceful. We're seeing even our thoughts go by. So we're not our thoughts, we're seeing them. But that awareness, that's that Neptune. But then within relationships, how to honor that within each other, honor each other's, we could call it spiritual level of involvement. And even if one person is interested in meditation and the other isn't, it's still good for the relationship. It brings a different level of engagement. It pulls it to a higher level, right?
Yeah.
But for many people who haven't been trained, Neptune can be drugs, alcohol, escapism, illusion, fear, making up stuff that isn't, not knowing how to deal with that type of sensitivity, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that, with each sign, there's, and with each birth chart too, it gives such great insight for people to be able to understand, not just, where, like how you're saying where they've been, but also what's in store, like what's coming up and just opportunities.
Whoa, that is so important, right? Because we think of like the fast pace of information right now in our media world and electronic world. There's so many things to pay attention to each and every day. There's so much going on. What about this and what about that and what about the economy and what about politics and what about career? Well, it's nice to have astrologies kind of point to where it's helpful for you to focus in your life at any given time. Mm-hmm. And that's another use of astrology. That's transits and progressions to show where Jupiter is right now for all of our listeners who have Scorpio in their chart. Jupiter just moved into Scorpio. And it shows, the deeper interest in intimacy. It also shows us secrets getting revealed, and of course, of the more Scorpion nature. So we have sexual scandals and meaningful revelations going on. But it's good to see where that opportunity is at in your chart this year, where Jupiter's moving through, and how it's affecting the relationship. relationships for people at the outer planet level, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they don't stay the same. They continue to grow. Just as you and your listeners are interested in growing, evolving, changing, discovery, well, relationships at that spiritual level, they do as well. They're not interested in just trying to be comfortable with who they used to be or the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And that brings a whole another dimension into the relationship, right?
It really does. I mean, and what's interesting, when you look at it from an astrology point of view, it makes things, I think, much more clear on, and how you talked about this initially in our first discussion. It's just kind of, how it, when we're working with people, and if it takes them a while to process something, that's how they work, and for us to just develop greater levels of patience in doing that. And just having the information gives us I think, not just compassion, but just the understanding on how to communicate better with those around us.
And that creates harmony, right? When we have that acceptance rather than wondering what's wrong with them.
Yeah, for sure.
And you think of the difference of the elements, like fiery people want to have a future and goal-oriented, watery people. The people who have natural emotional cycles that most of us don't understand. And they have a healthy, introspective, introverted part of their character that in relationships people can wonder what's wrong. You seem quiet. When people who are of that nature, they know that bugs them because nothing's wrong. Quiet's just right sometimes. But isn't it good to know if one of our partners is going through if they have strong water in their chart, and they cyclically need time alone just to kind of process emotionally, quietly, within, introspectively, and then communicate. It's good to know.
Yeah, it's good to have that information so you move forward. Now, I mean, I've had my birth chart done, and I know a lot of people have. Is that something that you would recommend that people have as their kind of just have handy and understand, so that as they're going through the process of the book and reading the book, it's a little bit more clear to them on how everything is coming together?
Absolutely, and I would say specifically important, because we don't talk about just in general, but we go through the planets in each of the signs, getting along with planets in each of the other signs. So you want to know, have your chart done so you can see what your planet and your signs are all about, and what your partner's planets and signs are all about, and understanding. It can be so helpful with like even with parents, with children. One of my children has a strong, fiery personality, always kind of popular and funny and happy-go-lucky. Except I noticed about once a month he'd come home and head down and just go downstairs and cocoon in a blanket and watch corny television and not want to talk for a while. And if I'd ask him what's wrong, what happened, boy, he'd get upset with me. But I studied his astrology and realized what was wrong was I was bugging him. He needed just once in a while to cocoon. He had the Cancer rising, to nest, just to pull back. And so after I started studying his astrology, when we go through that, I'd just go down and hang out with him quietly and just watch the corny show without saying anything, kind of give him, tacit a permission for, just being in this quiet pace is okay. And after no time at all, you want to go out and shoot hoops or something? But it was so different, just allowing him that rather than trying to fix him from it.
Yeah, just allowing, because it's interesting, certain people need like different kind of time, either with people or alone, in order to recharge.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we see that and allow for it, it can just create so much space in relationships, because I think most of our difficulties come in relationships when we're trying to change the other person somehow to fit our mold of what we think or expect. But this gives us an opportunity to have greater acceptance, even of the differences, and just with that, it just creates more ease in the flow of relationships.
Yeah, everything's, much more in flow, and you're just kind of understanding, more of where life is, as opposed to having it be a struggle. Because a lot of times people just walk around going, "Oh gosh, I just don't get these people. What are they doing?"
Yeah.
And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, probably,
Well, that's the window that we get with astrology, because that is what we do. I don't get these people. How could they think that way? What's going on? How could they act that way? Why don't they do what they're supposed to do? And then we get a chance to look at their chart through their eyes and say, I was trying to mold them to what I wanted them to be rather than what they naturally are.
Yeah, and move from there. Well, let's say someone, they've got your book, they've got their birth chart, and they're like ready to go, but it's, the book is very well written and it's easy to understand, but maybe it's, they still just need a little bit of help in kind of seeing where things go. Do you do private sessions with people to kind of better understand their charts?
Oh, absolutely. That's my day-to-day job. That's what my work is. I do consultations with people about their astrology, where I go over it with them, but mostly I go help them interpret it. When they come to me, they're asking for my view of what's possible here, what can we work with this here. So, their particular chart, their particular timing, and their particular relationships, that's what we do.
Well, and so, gosh, I mean, with Valentine's right around the corner, I'm sure you're going to be just amazingly busy. But do they
I hope
have...
so. I like that attitude.
Well, I don't doubt it. But so if, let's say somebody wants to bring in their birth charts and have an appointment with you to do like a relationship astrology, and they want to include their husband, boyfriend, loved one, whoever that person is, bring their information in too. Do they need to have a birth chart for that person as well?
Absolutely, or at least the birthday. For the more you have the birth chart, which is based on the birth time, the more precise you can get with the houses and rising signs that you can't get unless you have the birth time. But yet, definitely, you want to have the birthday, so you can look at that other person's planets. And I do this on the telephone. My website tells people how to do that and how to contact us, but telephone and Skype or one-to-one, face-to-face. But I encourage a lot of interaction with people with the relationship astrology relationship. So we talk about what's possible, where the potential difficulties are, but people actually like to get in and talk about what their real experiences are. And we can help them right with there. So it's like, well, this is how we can work with that and allow for both of them and find a path beyond who's right, who's wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you, because, I mean, at the end of the day, who's right and who's wrong doesn't make a good relationship. It's about compromise, and it's about understanding and compassion and patience.
And it's really so much an education process. I'm in a good marriage, 42 years, but we still have to educate each other a lot about how we're changing, growing, what's important to us now, how our behavior might be affecting our partner's behavior. I can just speak for myself there. It's important to know, like how we change and grow. But that's the principle of education instead of assuming. And how many people assume that the other person should know how I like to be loved? If they really love me, they'd know how I like to be cared for, what I need, what's important. But in truth, we have to learn to reveal and share as much as assume that the other person is going to be that intuitive.
Yeah, to have that much information. Well, and so, like, when people come to you and let's say they bring their birth chart with them as opposed to you doing it, because I know that that's one of the services that you provide, which I think is fabulous, because it's always so great to have, I mean, you're noted as the leader in mind, body, and spirit, so it's so great to have somebody who knows this stuff inside out doing birth charts. But let's say someone brings a birth chart to you. Is it something does that have to ever be redone, or, the birth chart is the birth chart?
Well, that's what the birth chart implies, yes. It's what, like the seed of a tree. Mm-hmm. The big tree grows from it, and it's a particular kind of a tree. Maybe it's an apple tree. Maybe some years it will grow good apples, and some years not so good apples, but it won't grow bananas. And the birth chart is like that. It doesn't say who you are, but it shows what the seed is, and that stays with us. Yes, that pattern. And then the transits and progressions, that's where the planets are moving today and into this next year, and how they're moving through our chart. And that's what gives us this healthy focus of, here's where opportunities opening up. Here's where I'm going to have to be more self-disciplined. And, with astrology, I've never found an aspect in like compatibility, comparing charts, that's an absolute deal breaker. Yeah, sometimes people shouldn't stay together because the people, but there's always a high road of being able to work with everything that shows up in astrology. Again, we don't have to just look for that perfect fit, because people who are at that Neptune level that you're asking about again, they want soulmate, but if we look for soulmate through the other, but often it's like sharing soul growth rather than looking for it to be completed by the other. Don't you think?
I would agree with you. I would agree with you on that. I think that there's lots of it's just fascinating to me just how the planets align, and when I've had different readings with astrology and had appointments, I mean, you can tell what really resonates, and it's usually dead on, of what's going on with the planets, and it all affects everything.
Well, it does, and it's one of our great tools. It's held me captivated for my whole adult life.
Well, and so, David, we could talk forever about this. I mean, I haven't even gone into all the things I'd like to ask, but, we do want our listeners to pick up astrology and relationships, especially right before Valentine's Day. And so, David, where can people connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about the services that you offer?
Well, my website is davidpond.com, just my name.com, and that'll take you right to my website, which shows the different kinds of books. I have many books on astrology. I've read quite a bit on the chakras. I have a new book coming out on meditation, all these different maps of consciousness of trying to be healthy in this inner world. And all the information is there. My email is david@davidpond.com. I'd be glad to share our phone number, 360-918-8411. And my wife, Lori, and I work together. She answers and helps people arrange and ask the questions that they need to ask to get an appointment set up. But those are the ways to contact me. And my website shows all the types of services I have available, so check it out.
Yeah, for sure. Start the new year off right with your birth chart reading and figure out what the planets have in store for you. Those celestial beings aren't just hanging out there. They've got great information for us. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Well, thank you, Marianne, for having me. I enjoyed our connection.
Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.